So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, and welcome to our information webinar on the upcoming conference, Pagtatanim, Sowing Seeds of Faith, Solidarity for the Filipinos People's Struggle for Peace. My name is the Dr. Reverend Patricia Lisson, and I am the Vice Chair of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines Global, and I'm also a coordinator for the International Interfaith Network. Our webinar today will be held in English, but live interpretation, I'll get that out there, is available in both French and Spanish. And you can access these languages by clicking the interpreter button at the bottom of the Zoom interface and selecting the language and channel of your choice. I'll just take a minute while people try to do that, and so you can connect in. So in the 1980s, a major historical point in solidarity for the Philippines was the Stony Point Conference, which gathered people of faith to stand against the Marcos dictatorship and enhance coordination in the anti-dictatorship campaign. Following the ousting of Marcos, the coordination development of Stony Point diminished. However, even today, until today, the roots of armed conflict remain unresolved, and there is no guaranteed peace for the improved Filipino masses in the countryside. So that leads us to the 2025. This year marks the Jubilee year to biblical tradition called for a year of rest, the freeing of slaves, the forgiveness of debts, and the redistribution of land, a call and tradition that remains relevant to the Philippine situation and the Philippine people's struggle for land, food sovereignty, social justice. In this light, we are calling for a global interfaith conference on human rights in the Philippines to continue and build upon the historical legacy of Stony Point and strengthen the interfaith network for the Philippines. The other reason for calling this conference is over the past several years, the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines has successfully mobilized faith contacts via the Investigate PH work that was done in 2021, the International Observatory Mission for the elections in 2022, and the Interfaith Learning Tour of 2023, and the International People's Tribunal of 2024. And out of those events, a solid network of church peoples were pulled together to support the Philippine struggle. The current times call for another broad global upsurge from the faith sector to witness and accompany the Philippine people's struggle and to address the root causes of the armed conflict and seek a just and lasting peace. And so that's the roots or the basis, the foundation on which we are building this conference. I would just like to share the objectives of the conference as we go in and listen to the speakers who will present the context and dig deeper into the root causes and the needs for peace, but also flesh out our objectives. And so one of our objectives is to broaden and gather global support from the faith sector for solidarity for the Philippine people's struggle for a just and lasting peace, especially to develop programs of accompaniment which will garner global solidarity support for the most marginalized and oppressed people of the Philippines, especially in the rural areas. Second, to develop and strengthen the global interfaith solidarity network for the Philippines, to solidify the membership and operation and plans for the network in cooperation with the ICHRP and EcuVoice and NCCP and other partners in the Philippines, to develop a work plan in preparation for the church solidarity activities, including Chai May in 2025, and Manila in 2026, and other major activities. And our last one is to grow and support the grassroots and institutional, I'll get there, too early in the morning for me in Montreal, collaboration and coordination and unity. So those are our objectives that we're working from. And just to say that just to remind people who are organizing and supporting this conference is the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, Global, the International Interfaith Network, also the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, Ecumenical Voice for Peace, and other institutions are supporting us as we move forward to our conference in May. And so the dates, just let me remind you, the dates for the conference, and we'll talk about this more at the end of the webinar, June 27th to 28th in Rome. And so with that in mind, let me turn it over to our speakers. And as I said, our speakers this morning will be addressing the root causes of this conference, why we need to be gathering and building support and organizing ourselves to address these issues, but also the theological reasons behind that, as well as responding to that from the World Student Christian Movement and from other members in our global network. And so our first speaker this morning, I would like to welcome Amira Lidasan. She is the co-chairperson of the Sandogo Alliance and the senatorial candidate in the upcoming midterm elections in the Philippines. Amira will speak on the worsening state of unpeace in the Philippines. I turn it over to you, Amira, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to Amira.
Assalamualaikum. No, you know that the state of unpeace in the Philippines can still be rooted on the unresolved conflicts in the Philippines, especially about the land, the monopoly of land, the historical injustice, specifically to the Moro people and the indigenous people. And then because of the continuing oppression of our government, and at the time of Bongbong Marcos Jr., what he did was to continue the situation of unpeace that was became a legacy of former President Duterte. And Bongbong Marcos is also the president who, upon his position in power, did not call for a peace negotiation. Even on the moonlight stage, what we did is to continue the policy of what they call to localize the peace talks with the National Democratic Front, and then continue the Executive Order number 70, the National Internal Security Policy of the state, and using the concept of the full or institutionalize the full of nation approach. So that meant the agency, the National Task Force to eliminate local armed conflict, being budgeted by the government, is the agency that they will rely on the issue of peace negotiation. And it also meant that peace negotiation will not be on the centralized level, or will not be, but will be on the provincial and localized level. So that is how they approach the peace negotiation. Bongbong Marcos Jr. and former President Duterte has said that the kind of peace negotiation that they like is the one that is moving forward, like the with the Moro National Liberation Front and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. However, even in the uh, first agenda of the peace talks between the Moro groups, the first agenda being the ceasefire, there are so many recorded violations, no, on both sides. It's more on the government, no, and recently they had another violation on the issue of miscommunication or not um, uh, discussing, no, visits in Moro territories, no. So that has become a problem also, and a situation of unease in our community. So uh in the executive order number 70, despite it being targeted to the National Democratic Front and the New People's Army areas, the Moro and indigenous peoples are also affected because um, it involves, no, local, all agencies of the government, state security forces, enable civil society formations, no, for counterinsurgency purposes, even relief drives, medical missions, no, and these kinds of humanitarian um, activities, no, are used, no, um, by the government with the objective of um, influencing areas that had a long engagement with the government about problems in their areas, you know, and have long are known, no, areas that are known that protesting, no, encroachment of multinational companies in the areas. No, so these local government units and other agencies, and even this counter insurgency program, no, it enforces or reinforces the government's neoliberal policies in the country, as it targets, no, in the Bangsamoro indigenous peoples, um, the areas of mineral resources, no, um, for mining, commercial plantations, and even infrastructure. So militarization, they have heightened troop deployment in so-called red areas, even in Moro areas that they say are hotbed of um, remnants of terrorist groups, no, which they said that they have already neutralized during the declaration of martial law in Mindanao. But this militarization are also seen in areas where there are destructive projects like mining in our communities, and in areas where there is a strong opposition to this destructive or aggressive development in these areas. There is military encampment in communities. You have heard about the schools, the Lumad schools that you once created, no, to serve the Lumad students for their education. It became a military camp, no, and they are also using it as for encampment, the military for encampment in the communities. There's also the creation of paramilitary groups. Some of those are being used, the local groups, even using the name of indigenous peoples group, no, further dividing the people. But the most okay. Okay, I think the most the one of the policies that Bongbong Marcos used is the bombings, no, in the indigenous and Moro communities, no. Bongbong Marcos policy of bombing communities, no, has forcibly evacuated uh, hundreds of Moro and indigenous people from their communities, and even uh, Christian farmers communities, no, in other parts, not only in Mindanao but in the whole Philippines, no. In during the Duterte administration, there are already from 2017 to 2022 showed that there are 591 bombs to 589 artillery shells utilized, 74 rounds of aerial strafing, 56 bombing incidents, no, in 1 year alone. And since Bongbong Marcos assumed presidency, Karapatan has documented almost 50,000 victims of forced evacuations due to bombings. No, most of the bombings happen in indigenous communities now, specifically in areas where the enhanced defense um, sites, no, are also set up. No, EDCA sites are set up in the northern part of the Philippines, where most of the indigenous people reside, like in Cagayan Valley, in the mountain provinces. No, so these bilateral military agreements, like the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, they intensify militarization, and they also justify no bombing in the community. So recent bombings in Cagayan Valley province, home to 2 or 4 new EDCA sites, exemplify this. No, so Bagao in Cagayan, um, Malay-Balay in Bukidnon, that's also Himaymalan in Negros, it's home to indigenous areas also. These incidents show how militarization and bombings threaten, disturb, and disrupt also our communities and our environment. No? So, um, these are these bombings, no, actual and militarization now also affects indigenous peoples, no, individuals and children. No? One of those fired upon by the army are groups of farmers, no, in Siargao in 2021. We have documented that 12 years old, like Angel Rivas, were killed because of indiscriminate firing of the military. So if you have this kinds of continuing military bombings in the community and continuing militarization in the community, it disrupts not only the lives of the people, no, their economic life, but also it's a violation that should be taken upon, no, um, uh, in the peace negotiation. However, because there is a lack of a formal negotiation between the uh, government and the National Democratic Front, all these human rights violations, no, they are not taken upon, and we cannot um, uh, present this, no, before there's a mechanism called the Joint Monitoring Committee that um, um, uh, looks at the reported violations on both sides, no, for the CARIL, no, for the Comprehensive Agreement on the Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law. The Moro National Liberation Front and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front doesn't have that kind of mechanism where human rights violation and IHL are being taken upon in a formal peace negotiation. So it also serves as a problem for the victims and their families, because if the local courts will not take them, and if the Commission on Human Rights are not uh, are also a government body, very limited, no, in their investigations. So it puts us, most of the victims and the families of the victims and advocates, no, to push for international um, groups, human rights groups, and international, and to use international human rights instrument to look into these violations. But however, that's also very limited because we cannot get justice if the police, the military, and the current and previous presidents are not prosecuted. No, so that's one of the causes also of the MPs in the Philippines. Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity, and wassalamualaikum to you all.
Thank you very much, Mira, for giving us a clear and direct understanding of the current government's work and their unpeace, their situation of how they're creating an unpeace, how we should not move forward, that how important the international connection is to building a just and lasting peace, and that we as international organizations and supporters need to work together to ensure that a just peace is created for all, because international law and human rights violations are not acceptable in designing and moving forward in a peace process. Thank you very much. And that sets the stage very clearly and carefully as we move to our next speaker, who is a Roman Catholic priest, Father Aries Amandra, who is a member of the Society of the Divine Word. And so I would like us to share it's on video. And so Ryan, I invite you to start the video, please.
A pleasant day to all our viewers and listeners. Thank you for the organizers of this event, and thank you for having me. Today, I'm going to share to you regarding Jubilee and its relation to our forthcoming conference in June, Pagtatanim, Sowing Seeds of Faith, Solidarity for the Filipino People's Struggle for Peace. In general, Jubilee is a time of rejoicing in everyday life. For the Jewish community, it is a year of emancipation and restoration every 50 years. In the Catholic Church, it is a period of remission from the penal consequences of sin granted under certain conditions for a year, usually at intervals of 25 or 50 years. However, this concept has deep biblical, historical, and theological perspectives. It invites us to renew, strengthen, and collectively discern our pilgrimage to holiness and hope to attain a peace where everyone enjoys the graces and collectively responds to the universal vocation to holiness and service to others. What is the year of Jubilee? The word Jubilee is derived from the Hebrew word Yubel, which means ram's horn used as a trumpet whose sound indicated to everybody the beginning of the Jubilee year. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 8 to 10, it says, "And you shall count 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the time of the 7 weeks of years shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall send abroad the loud trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement you shall send abroad the loud trumpet throughout all your land. And you shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you when each of you shall return to his property, and each of you shall return to his family." In the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the relation between Jubilee and liberation is even closer because the Hebrew term Yubel is translated as liberation, aphesis in Greek, unlike in Latin, Jubileus. This liberation was first of all for the Jews who were slaves, but it is also included the remission of sins. The Jubilee prescriptions describe God's original intention that the Jews should remain free from slavery for all time by instituting a Sabbath year. The Jubilee year is an economic, cultural environment and communal reset when the land and people rest and all those who are in slavery are set free to return to their communities. Thus, these laws are essentially concerned with social relationship, economic, security, stability, and the well-being of the community. They seek to ensure that people live in ways that reflect good relationships with God, with each other, and with creation. After the Babylonian exile, in which the people of God had the experience of being deprived of their own land, of the temple, of their own identity as a people, a horizon of hope and liberation opened up by God's messengers, the prophets. Prophet Isaiah announced, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the afflicted, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, release to the prisoners, to announce a year of favor from the Lord and a day of vindication by our God, to comfort all who mourn, to place on those who mourn in Zion a diadem instead of ashes, to give them oil of gladness instead of mourning, a glorious mantle instead of a faint spirit." From Isaiah chapter 61. The prophet heralds the year of the Lord's favor, the Jubilee, which expresses itself in two vital directions: liberation and consolation. Liberation is from the physical evils, from interior lacerations, from the condition of slavery. Consolation is a transformation of the way one exists, from mourning to joy, from indifference to compassion. Consolation. So three important themes of the biblical Jubilee. But from here, you will find the references here from the book of Leviticus chapter 25 and from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 11. Now, there are three important themes of the biblical Jubilee that I would like to highlight. First is rest for the land. Second is remission of debts, restitution of the land. And the third is liberation of slaves. In practice, it was the recognition, the universal nature of assets, which meant everything was available to all, the universal destination of goods and private property. All creations belong to God, the Creator, and is shared by Him with His generosity and entrusted to all humans as stewards of all His goods. In this world, our common home, we are only stewards and not owners. Secondly, remission of debts and restitution of the land. After 50 years, a reset was necessary so that everyone was at the same level of absolute, ideal, utopian communion and equality of property. Everything was again shared and distributed to the various tribes. Thus, each family once again obtained its property, its land, and all its sons. In places where land grabbing and massive land conversion, the Jubilee is the antidote. And the third, liberation of slaves. The book of Ezekiel, chapter 46, speaks of the Jubilee as the year of the release, of redemption, the year in which all those who have gone to service in order to survive poverty return to their homes, with their debts remitted and with the reappropriation of their land and their freedom. One can also think of all those people who are practically slaves to the superpowers because due to their debts, they are incapable of controlling their destiny. The activities of some multinational companies are often a veritable form of economic tyranny that oppresses some nations and societies. The Jubilee is destined to bring the humble, the poor, and the wretched, those who outwardly and inwardly depend on the hands of God and of their brothers and sisters, to the center of the church. The Gospel of St. Luke, which tells us about Jesus preaching in Nazareth, is the only one in the whole of the New Testament which mentions a Jubilee year, giving it a great importance. I guess we're all familiar with chapter 4 of Luke, verse 16 and to 30. In Nazareth, Jesus defines his mission as messianic, saying it is the fulfillment of a prophecy that announced the preaching of a Jubilee year. This programmatic statement of Jesus corresponds perfectly with the biblical understanding of the Jubilee. The theme of the Jubilee, Yubel Aphesis, therefore moved from a liturgical language and act to an ethical and social language and experience. This element is still relevant today as a way of not reducing the Christian Jubilee merely to a basic celebration or ritual, but rather of transforming it into a paradigm of Christian life. Therefore, the Jubilee year is one of the most radical ideas in the Bible. It would have effectively prevented cycles of intergenerational poverty and created a social and economic parity that would make Israel unique among all nations. So why is it important that this conference is happening in the Jubilee year? Jubilee reminds us that God expects the church to challenge worldly imperfection through their relationship with each other and the pursuit of justice, through social and legal provision, and through personal action and interaction, including generosity and sacrifice, as in the instruction to the disciples. Jubilee must have exposed the human greed and brought out the selfishness in society. The law couldn't change those things, it only showed it. But God said, I will pour out my spirit upon you, and the law will be written in your heart. The community of faith today has to translate this law. We don't have to go back to it. But if we walk in the Spirit and love God and love our neighbor, and this Jubilee will take place. The essence of Jubilee is God's inspired vision to interrupt the status quo and restore the primordial intention of God, where the relationships between humanity, creation, and God bring harmony, justice, and peace in our time. Jubilee is an expression of God's desire for all of creations to flourish. In this conference, we will celebrate and renew our commitment to God, who made everything possible for all of us to live, grow, and develop in peace. It is a gift granted to all of us, but at the same time, a responsibility to live and act. What is Jubilee's relationship then to the Philippines? The present ruling system in the Philippines is marred in economic and political crisis. The socioeconomic conditions of tens of millions of Filipinos, roughly 75%, are sharply deteriorating. The constant weakening of local agricultural industrial production results in rising unemployment and widespread economic displacement. These have led to high prices of goods, low wages, and economic displacement of the toiling people. The worsening economic and political crisis of the country continues to rouse the Filipino people to take action and wage collective resistance to fight for their urgent demands. The broad masses of the people are determined to fight for the rights, urgent demands, and long-term aspirations. Let us join in their cause, which is local as well as global. Let's make the Great Jubilee a year, a time of great openness of heart. We, men and women of goodwill, conscious of our mission of service, must promote, uphold, and defend the life and dignity of the human person. This belief requires not only that we treat all people in ways that reflect their inherent dignity, but that we measure every policy and program by whether it enhances or diminishes human life and dignity. We must rise and protect the common good, the sum of those conditions in society that make it possible for all people to achieve their full human potential. We realize our human potential in relationships to others and have an obligation to build a society that gives all people the opportunity to realize their basic human rights. Our faith solidarity reminds us that we are one human family, that we are our brothers and sisters' keepers, whether they live across the strait or across the globe. It calls us to pursue justice throughout the world, no matter how distant the issues may seem. We invite you, fellow advocates of peace and justice, to mobilize and spread the good news and the privileged opportunity to make God's call truly an event in our lives. Hope to see you then in Rome in June 27 and 28 to celebrate the Jubilee with Pagtatanim, sowing seeds of faith, solidarity for the Filipino people's struggle for peace. Thank you, grazie, maraming salamat sa ating lahat.
Thank you, Father Aries, for clearly setting our conference on a solid foundation of justice and hope, and to remind us all that we are called to uphold human dignity, promote the common good of all, and to strengthen our solidarity as we move and join and grow together. Thank you very much. So I'd like to call on Yolanda Yongera, the Asian Pacific Coordinator for the World Christian Student Federation. And so Yolanda, please take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening from Jakarta, Indonesia, and warm greetings to everyone joining us today. My name is Yolanda Yongara, and I serve as the Asia Pacific Regional Executive for the World Student Christian Federations, and it is my privilege to represent WSCFAP in expressing our wholehearted support for this critical initiative, Pagtatanim. Pagtatanim, sowing seeds of faith, solidarity for the Filipino people's struggle for peace. This conference represents a vital opportunity for faith communities worldwide to act collectively in addressing the worsening human rights situations in the Philippines. For WSCF, supporting these initiatives align directly with our commitment to empowering youth to uphold justice, peace, and human rights. It is essential to bridge theological reflections with real-world actions, particularly in the face of systemic oppressions, violence, and inequality. Faith calls us to move beyond words to solidarity and advocacy, which this conference exemplifies. Last year, WSCFAP worked with NCCP, UCCP, and young people and students across the Asia-Pacific regions in Los Baños, Philippines, to explore the intersections of faith and justice. We witnessed firsthand the struggles of marginalized communities, including farmers in Lupang Ramos and fisherfolks in Cavite, Philippines. These communities continue to face land grabbing, militarizations, and economic exploitations. And as WSCF, we want to equip young people with the tools to advocate for human rights, highlighted the urgent needs for international solidarity. And these realizations highlights the essential role of faith communities in supporting individuals and communities as they engage in this struggle for justice. The Pagtatanim conference built upon these foundations, emphasizing the shared responsibility of faith communities to support the Filipino people's quest for justice and peace. This is not merely a Philippines issue, but it is a moral and global concern that calls for our collective response. This year is particularly significant as it marks the Jubilee, a time of renewal and justice. The essence of the Jubilee calls us not only to reflect, but to act. It is a reminder that justice is not an abstract concept, but a lived reality that requires decisive interventions. And we think now is such a time. The increasing human rights violations in the Philippines, exacerbated by systemic oppressions and geopolitical tensions, demands urgent solidarity. And this conference provides a space for faith communities to translate their values into meaningful actions, reinforcing our collective responsibility to uphold justice and peace at this critical moment. And for the interfaith sector, this conference is a reminder of our unique positions to influence change. By standing in solidarity with those who face systemic oppressions, we embody the values of compassion, justice, and hope. Our collective action demonstrates that faith communities are not passive observers, but powerful agents of transformations capable of addressing deep-seated issues of inequality and violence. And as member of WSCF and the broader interfaith movement, we believe in planting seed of hope and solidarity, knowing that the fruits of our collective actions will one day lead to a world rooted in peace and justice. Together, let us reaffirm our commitment to the Filipino people and to building a future where faith inspires actions for a better world. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolanda, for bringing those words and reminding us how important it is to link theology with real action, and that the importance of calling us all to live out the words of Micah with what does the Lord require of us, but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with our God, and which will lead to the building of communities of hope. So thank you very much. And now I would like to call on Kedge Andra from the Student Christian Movement of Manila. Kedge?
Good day, everyone. I am Kedge Andres, the National Chairperson of the Student Christian Movement of the Philippines. During a recent survey, more Filipinos expressed that they are less hopeful coming into 2025. Moreover, 63% of Filipinos have rated themselves poor, the highest in 21 years. Very ironic since we are in the year of hope. Despite these, the youth remain steadfast. In an impeachment complaint of the very corrupt Vice President Sara Duterte, the daughter of Rodrigo Duterte, nearly a third of the complainants were youth, including yours truly. Yesterday, we almost crashed the venue where Amy Marcos, the daughter of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and the sister of President Bongbong Marcos, and stated that there is no space for plunderers and human rights violators in the University of the Philippines. Last night, we learned that the League of Private Schools in the Philippines have terminated its formal partnership with the NTF-LCAC, and we credit this development with the growing clamor of students against campus militarization. With this, we are cognizant that hope is not just an abstract buzzword. Hope comes through collective struggle, by becoming fishers of the people and co-carrying the crosses of the oppressed. Through our struggle, hope springs abundant. But we cannot do it alone here in the Philippines. We need to seek greater solidarities with freedom-loving peoples outside the Philippines, especially that there are also millions of Filipinos abroad that have been forced to migrate because of horrible working conditions and landlessness in our country. And worse, the curriculum of the youth in the Philippine educational system is designed for millions more to seek work abroad amidst the failure of the government to provide substantial and livable work. Marcos Jr. has been trying to rehabilitate the Marcos image abroad. He has visited numerous countries and has been trying to woo and be a sycophant to the United States. We need the united support and voices of our international solidarity work to stop the sin of deception and disinformation that has been the brand of the Marcoses and the Dutertes. It is also important to see that solidarity becomes stronger by seeing parallel dilemmas among countries and looking at the connections and the root causes, the societal root causes of these problems. We feel that we are not alone, that we are part of a global struggle for justice, human rights, and long-lasting peace. And I think the title of our program, Pagtatanim, is very apt. We really need church people to speak up because you have the power to influence and nurture the seed, the youth, who will also inherit the church, as many church institutions in the Philippines have remained silent and even complicit in the corruption and the wicked rule in our country. I myself have been a victim of red tagging by a certain Pastor Apollo Quiboloy, one of Duterte's right-hand men. Many church people are also afraid of red tagging and even conservative in mixing politics and faith. But Jesus' life was nothing short of political. He was a Palestinian that survived the massacre of the innocents. He was God but chose to be born poor in order to show his partiality towards the Anawim. He gave good news particular to the exploited, and his parables were deemed subversive. He was given the capital offense of the greatest empire back then. If Jesus would be born in the Philippines right now, he would be among the hundreds lining up among public hospitals at midnight because of the lack of free healthcare. He would experience bombings and trumped up charges by the US-backed armed forces of the Philippines. And as a prophet, he would demand conversion, a conversion towards standing ground for establishing a heavenly reign for the least, the last, and the lost. Let our gathering in Rome become a commitment, not only what the situation in the Philippines demands right now, but more so for the betterment of future generations. Especially this Jubilee year, let us be a prophetic voice that denounces the sinful situation of the day, gathers the mobilization of the people, and lays the groundwork for a world free from exploitation, human rights abuses, and oppression. Let us rejoice in hope. Let us persevere in the struggle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kedge. And I really appreciate your pulling out that hope is not a buzzword, but a word of action. And so, and global solidarity is key in us addressing these issues. And by addressing human rights issues in the Philippines enables us to address human rights issues around the globe. So thank you very much for your words and inspiration. And so I call on the Reverend Chris Ferguson to offer his, let me start again. Reverend Chris Ferguson, who is also a member of the coordinating team of the International Interfaith Network. And so Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I want to begin my remarks with simply a triple amen. I came to add the kind of organizational and intentions of what we're trying to build beyond the conference, but I just find myself so inspired. To just locate us very quickly, that the conference that we're holding is part of larger movements within the interfaith sector within the human rights movement for the Philippines, both locally and globally. And so we're trying to locate what we're about as the Interfaith Network within several contexts. And one is to move forward together with all of ICHRP and the rest of the human rights sector to make sure that we mobilize for the defense of human rights in the Philippines that deals with both the rising urgency and spiraling atrocities of the repression of human rights, but based on the very hard work that was done on Investigate PH, a long-term process, always hold that work to defend human rights in the larger context of addressing root causes. The ICHRP report talked about the contexts of human rights abuses in the Philippines based on the framework of 3 wars that were all the product of colonialism and current day capitalist exploitation. The war against the poor, the war against dissent, and the war against the moral people, which was an extension of Filipino participation in the so-called US war against terror. So that in this, the imperative since our conference in Thailand a year and a half ago was a focus very much on there needed to be a reinvigoration of a real peace process that allowed root causes to be addressed, that the continual struggle to defend human rights based on our both religious and political and human perspective required the transformations of the systems globally and locally of injustice. So trying to bring all this together, I want to say that one of the contexts that makes this very urgent is that we understood that we needed to move beyond simply a church-based sectoral approach to an interfaith approach. So we're hoping that the Rome Conference, one, will deepen the interfaith solidarity. The other keen aspect that we understood was there had been a moment where global solidarity was very much driven and supported and upheld by interfaith and religious institutions that were global. And this has not been as strong as it needs to be. So it is the strengthening of the institutional. And at the same time, which might seem as a contradiction, but as part of our core image, is that we know that basically peace will be built from below. And it is the people themselves through their grassroots organization that will build peace. So this conference is part of the visionary option to assure that as we move forward, global and local solidarity never sees any daylight between the institutional, organized global solidarity and local and global grassroots movements. And we are trying to do that in a new way with this conference. Also, we see this conference, therefore, as not only as responding to the imperatives, but as very much a part of movement building. And we want that to be visible, that there will be visible the local and the global, the grassroots and the institutional. Part of our current context is, yes, we talk about, in hopeful perspective, the context of the Jubilee. But to be clear, the Jubilee wasn't a program that was set out ahead of time as a vision for how a society might be. It was a prophetic, contestatory demand in the midst of an unjust system. So if this 2025 is the year of the Jubilee, most profoundly, it is the year of the realignment of empires. It is the year of the strengthening and deepening of projects of genocide and erasure. And we're fully conscious that this image of hope is that the hope that the interfaith community bears, and this is a lesson we've learned from Gaza, is a hope that can contain and be deepened by full acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation, including where there are real signs of lack of future. That hope does not require us to deny or to put to the side what is really going on, but rather our hope, which is the affirmation of life, is strengthened by really naming. And in the context of the Philippines, we have to name that within the strong resistance of people that our brother from the SCM so clearly manifested how students are making a difference. At the same time, there is a global project of the strengthening of the US empire and oppressing other world powers to redefine in terms of military positioning their might. So our conference comes at a moment to rebuild and our sectoral contribution. I just want to say that we know that we're called to this network through the voices, particularly of the NCCP, EcuVoices, and other religious actors in the Philippines who are full members of the Interfaith Forum, so that it is important to understand their sponsorship and their leadership. And a fundamental part of our driving image is to be led by the Filipino struggles itself. And we are so grateful that the strong leadership of NCCP, particularly in EcuVoice, have led to this new and creative response of combining all these levels of urgency. No empire exists without religious or spiritual justification. It is always appealing to some legitimacy of defending some greater cause. People's lives are destroyed supposedly always to achieve the greater good. So we need to understand the religious sector needs to be present for three different reasons. One is it is our own imperative, the practice of our faith. The second has been so brilliantly exposed by Father Aris. But the second is because there are religious forces that are legitimizing the very project of death that we are against. And thirdly, knowing this, religious sectors themselves are under attack. As we see in the chat, are all non-governmental sectors. We are at the middle of the bullseye. That you can see even yesterday, Elon Musk declared that the Lutheran World Relief Organization in the United States is a criminal organization that is an enemy of the state, and all their government contracts have to be abolished. That religious actors are under attack. So we are not defending ourselves, but we are defending ourselves in order to defend the rights of all. So we're having a process. It will start with this meeting. We'll hear more about it in Rome, which will be a new kind of multi-sectoral organizing on many levels, leading towards hopefully deeper global understanding in the year following and the next year. So we're thinking of a series of 3 global meetings. The Interfaith, the great thanks is that we also work through ICHRP intersectionally and always in deep harmony with all those who defend life. So just to talk about our imperatives, yes, the Jubilee, the proclamation, as has been said in Luke 4, the Spirit of the Lord is upon us to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight of the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the Jubilee year, and all of this in the year of the realignment of death-dealing empires.
Thank you, Chris, for setting our conference in the real world. And as you've outlined, one that we would like to challenge profoundly. I appreciated pulling together the global religious institutions and the grassroots, realizing that, and we know this in our history, but also in our work, that the hope comes from organizing at the grassroots, coming and working in conjunction with our institutions and pulling us together. And also that the image of hope, the whole idea of hope, comes out of the Jubilee call, and that we will sorely need it as we move into this next part of year 25. So it's interesting that the Jubilee and, as you mentioned, the formation of what's happening in our governmental institutions around the world. And so the Jubilee year is a clear need as we move forward and work together in solidarity, looking for peace and human rights and human dignity in our journey. Thank you. So I'd like to just invite our next speaker to come and describe the next steps. And I think sorry, I'm saying think because we had a little change of schedule, speakers, and I think it's Yesha or Reb Chris. I'm sorry, I'm a little confused here.
Depends if Chris is here. Are you there, Reb Chris?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So moving forward, it is really we are really greatly inviting everyone and in anticipation for this Pagtatanim conference, Sowing Seeds of Faith and Solidarity for People's Struggle for Peace. This will be held in Rome, like everybody have mentioned. So this gathering is not just an event, but it will be a profound opportunity for us to reaffirm our commitment to help our brothers and sisters in the Philippines and to build communities rooted in hope and justice. We will come together on this in this event to plant seeds of compassion, understanding, and solidarity. So your presence at this conference will really be a testament to our shared vision of creating a world where love and peace and kindness prevails. We can make a difference really and bring light to those in need. So over the month of February, we will be releasing details and more information about the conference. This would include the registration, the travel advisory of where you can find housing in Rome during the Jubilee, in the Jubilee year, and how your organization can support the conference. We will be, just watch out for the news from the ICHRP on the conference to come out by probably by March 1st. It would be there already. And if you have questions in the meantime, you can always send your messages or contact us through the iChirp Global Secretariat at gmail.com. So we really hope that you will be there in solidarity with the Filipinos.
Thank you, Yaisa, for that, for those directions and concrete information. And again, I would just add to that, for other questions, certainly contact ICHRP Europe, and they will be able to help us with concrete information, as Yaisa said. But also, I would encourage you to contact your country chapter or regional chapters, because they probably will have be able to answer some of that information for you as well. And look for this in March. So we have, it's coming quick, so please. So that concludes our gathering, our webinar today. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers who brought these inspiring and informative messages to us, messages that we need to have and hold in our heart as we build our solidarity together and challenge some of the injustice that is swirling around us in today's world. Thank you for attending this webinar. I really appreciate your attention and your willingness to attend this webinar. Please share this information with all of your friends and colleagues and networks where you are located and living. We really appreciate that. And as Yaisa said, please check for the updates. I think updates will be coming in March with more detailed travel information, etc., etc. And to remind you that this conference is an interfaith conference to pull together solidarity and to address the issues of human rights violations and international humanitarian law violations, not only in the Philippines, but when we do that, it addresses all these happenings around the world. And so thank you again for joining us. And I would just like to wish you all a good day, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm in Montreal, Canada, so I'm in the early mornings. And so please have a great day and live carefully and peacefully with each other. Thank you.